Welcome to Lost to the Nails, episode 13. We're calling this the 10th edition cold take / waiting for epic. Eric, I think we did better. Last time we went half a year.
Yeah. It's gone from half a year or maybe a little bit longer than that between episodes to 2.5 months. So we are slowly crawling back to something resembling a functional podcast.
Yeah, we were going to record this last week. Something came up. Can't remember what it was. Doesn't matter. We're all here. So in this episode, we are doing the cold take reaction to 10th. So everybody had the hot take. We've let it settle in a little bit. We're going to kind of give our thoughts as casual and narrative players as to what we're seeing. We're going to talk about anticipating epic, because initially we thought that we would have stuff on pre-order. Actually, I thought we would have stuff by now. And apparently that's been pushed back. So we'll talk about what we've seen, what we're hoping to see from that, because this show very well could go 8mm once that's fully released. And I don't know that this is a new segment, but in the middle, I was sent Condiments by longtime listener of Splinter Mine and listener of this show. Neil Tweed sent me English condiments that I'm going to try on air, even though, I don't know, I had an ex-girlfriend in high school who very famously said, if I've heard the sound of you eating, I've imagined your slow, painful death. But I'm going to have to edit it. So
now all of our beloved listeners get to join your ex-girlfriend in the experience of having heard you eat.
And eating foods that I've never had before. So this it should be, I don't know, it'll either be glorious or just a dumpster fire.
This is how much we love you, readers. And the astute listeners of this podcast will also note that we are not talking about the World Eaters, despite promising to talk about that. If you have ever heard us tell you what we're going to have the next podcast about, you know that to always be a lie. So it's at true. This point, you can't be upset.
It's true. Yeah, we're definitely doing it next episode.
Definitely.
Probably. So what have you been up to since then?
So since then, I have largely been panic painting for Nova. I started out believing that I had a Warlord almost completely painted for Adeptus Titanicus. Listener, it was not almost completely painted. I was under the impression this was like, oh, we'll do some enamels and then we'll be done with it. I had painted 4 of the armor plates, and there are a lot of armor plates on a Warlord Titan.
There are
way more than 4. So I've been working on that. That's done now. That's exciting. And then also I'm in 2 events for Adeptus Titanicus at Nova, a 2,000 point set of games, and then a 3,000 point set of games. And so for the 3,000 point set of games, I need another 1,000 points of Titan. The good news about that is a single War Master Titan. Yeah. So that's what I'm working on right now. That's realistically about a third done. As of recording, I leave for Nova in like a little over a week. So that's going to be this week's project. I'm sort of quasi taking off work to get some of that done. We're in an okay place, I think. It may be one of those like, yep, the chassis is painted, the weapons are painted, it's conspicuously missing its armor. I refer to that as the Red Sonja pattern Titan. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing is almost entirely panic painting for that. How about you, Brian?
Well, in our Discord thing, Sensible Brian showed up to kind of kick Chaotic Brian out of the driver's seat, and I've actually been getting hobby stuff done that is related to what I'm going to play, and it's been really weird and really good. So Masters of the Forge, they're doing a boarding patrol / combat patrol by Labor Day painting challenge thing, and I went ahead and just made a 500 point boarding patrol list of World Eater stuff that I didn't have painted, and I got the Exalted 8-bound done. I have the 10 Berserkers from the list that I just have to base. They're done and ready to go, and then I just need Jackals to finish it off because there were some other Berserkers that I finished too. So I did that, and then I had an opportunity to play a game with I never get to play with Austin. So if you listen to the independent characters, Austin is he's the guy that paints all the Carl's Titans and stuff like that. It's super positive. Like, you cannot have more fun playing a game than when you're with that guy. There was a chance where Austin and both Carl and Josh all had the same day off that I did without my kids because they started school a little bit early. So we got to play a team game that was it was interesting. I'll put it that way. He brought a couple of Lancers and he wanted to play this is obviously not like a legal list. He just brought a War Master, and I brought I painted the 2 Warhounds for a Lupercal. And man, those big Titans really need coordinated support. I mean, that they just cannot. The Iconoclast, completely different animal. Like, it wants to run forward and smash stuff, but its shooting helps out the other stuff around it, versus the War Master needs other things to strip shields and do it for it. And it's so vulnerable to assault that we really misplayed our deployment zone. We played with the match play rules. And funny enough, it was my first game with the match play rules. And I got to say, I love open war missions because, first of all, going into it, you can, like, I think when you go to do match play missions, you run into this thing where you're like, oh, on theory, we're on a level playing field and we're doing some sort of a thing. But then when you have to roll for what your objectives are, they rolled an objective where they had to destroy we had to place an objective marker in our zone, and they had to destroy it. The way that the deployment zone that we rolled up it was the one that has the 2 weird rectangular ones where the length of the longer side is like going towards the middle of the table, and then there's like a box in the middle. And with having a War Master, deployment was just wonky, and there was a giant hill that I thought was impassable, but I got charged through it. So
as it turns out, it was not impassable.
Yeah, I was like, I gave a little side eye. I was like, oh, we're charging down that, huh? Okay. Yeah, it was the way that the mission, the restriction on where you had to put the objective marker, because all that they had to do was just be in contact with it during the end phase, and then it was destroyed, and it was like 25 points. The only place to put it, well, you couldn't put it inside our deployment zone because it had to be more than 8 inches from the board edge, and you had an 8-inch deployment zone widthwise going in. So it was just weird. It was weird. But even then, once I realized that we were completely hosed and things were going to go badly, that's when Chaotic Brian gets to take over and just push the reactor button, because I'm just like, I'm going to try to go nuclear and take stuff with us. And of course, that was always good fun. So a little bit of Titanicus in. I played a 40K game that Josh talked about on the independent characters, so that really doesn't need to be rehashed here. We'll get into that when we talk about units that made it or translated or different. So
yeah, the match play book is really interesting though, because when that came out for Titanicus, I had a very we don't do that here reaction to the match play guide. I was like, I swear to God, if you turn God's Most Perfect Game into some competitive nonsense, I'm going to be upset with you. Yeah. But I think it's actually really decent. It's more the symmetrical mission book, which is nice. Because I did get a game of Titanicus in playing off the open war deck, and it was predictably wacky. 4 of the 6 Titans that got killed thanks to off-board artillery. Just the usual nonsense with the open war deck. Yeah, where you can't really, like you said, you can't really approach it with the mentality of like, oh yeah. Like this is an even playing field. I have a good shot at this. It's like, oh, cool. My Warhounds only move 8 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll figure this out. But even then, but it's fun. I've never had a bad game.
Yeah, because even ones where it's really hosed, where you're like, oh, everything's, reactors are going to run hot. There was a game I played with Josh where it was like all the stuff where everything was going to blow up, where it was like anything that was damaged would take additional damage, and stuff would your reactor would run hotter because of radiation or something. And it's weird. Titanicus is one of those games that I am just okay with having a game where you're like, when you go to start the thing out, you're like, this isn't going to go well because there's so many fun little moments, and there's like the challenge of trying to make little things work, which I mean, I know you can do that in 40K, but it's just 40K feels a lot more we're lining up and doing
I have found with 40K, whenever I go to like a narrative event or something that has a bunch of like planetary environmental effects, by turn 2, everyone's stopped paying attention to them.
Yeah.
And you know, you're on the blizzard planet and you can only see 18 inches. And then everyone's like, okay, cool. Anyway, so this 36-inch range shot is going to target that Land Raider. But yeah, I think it's a good game for it. And I do enjoy those aspects of, because it does sort of also change your plan where you're like, okay, I was going to run up the board. I can't run.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah.
New plan. We shoot our way out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what it is. I mean, there's an event. So the event that I did in November last year, there's going to be another one this year up in Chico that Anthony's running for the G3 group. And it's a 2,000 point event. And it is really amazing how different your list looks with those extra 250 points. If you're used to 1,750 points. And I was looking at it, and thankfully with having it kind of snapping out of that whole winter rut of natural disasters and father-in-law in the hospital craziness. Now that I'm back to kind of a regular painting schedule, I looked at it and I was like, if I painted 2 more warlords, I could just play, the Extermigus Maniple, and just go real, just balls out with a crazy list that you never get to use, so it's going, I think I'm actually going to go with like a YOLO, Nemesis Warbringer, just like, hey, I'm just going to go dual melta cannons, or just something ridiculous, because with being able to raise the heat and raise the strength a couple of points. I mean, it's just, I'll probably get charged by a handful of knights and have my whole maniple disintegrate in like 2 seconds, but I'll look better getting there, and I'll have 3 painted warlords at the end of it. So who cares? Yeah.
And shooting high strength weaponry at knights is funny because you're like, ion shields. No.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
It was a nice thing. Well, before we go into our stuff, you've started a show since the last time we were here.
Yeah. So I have apparently in my abundant free time decided that I should podcast about me not doing enough hobby. So I started another show with a guy named Calvin, who's a member of my local club. We've been doing a lot of historicals, and we decided to do a podcast about historicals. It's called The Plastic Press Gang. And the idea behind it is a casual approach to historicals. So coming at it from not like, well, is this the right color blue for, the Prussian army in 1871, given the status of the quartermasters in, on or near Stuttgart, not interested in that.
Yeah.
Trying to make it more approachable. It is a little bit a part of our hobby that I think is dying for lack of people coming in. And so one of the things we're trying to do is get folks into it by, approaching it with a sort of a casual and inclusive atmosphere. We've done, I think, 2 episodes, an intro episode and an episode on the 30 Years' War. And I believe an air fryer is currently going off.
Yeah, I'm burning something really bad, so I'm pausing the recording really quickly.
Welcome back.
Hey! Well, that was interesting. Yeah, you heard the beeping. That was my smoke alarm going off. So,
sweet.
Yeah, pro tip, guys. If you are podcasting, don't try to multitask and run an air fryer, because I was trying to get some stuff ready for the
tasting menu sauce portion of this.
Yeah, and apparently I just burned the bejesus out of some waffle fries in an air fryer. So, yeah, I really wish there was video of that.
I'm very sad that we cannot share the video of you looking faintly concerned and then very concerned, trying to discreetly cover your microphone as if that was going to solve the fire alarm problem.
Yeah, I was like, well, if the fire alarm's going off, something is, because I started smelling waffle fries about 5 minutes ago, and I was like, yeah, but it's going to shut off and be fine. Like it'll do that. So
it'll just coast into crispy.
The testing, the condiment testing portion of this episode will just have to wait a little bit. So we got that. Yeah. So I am a guy who has, I mean, aside from being a history teacher, when it comes to and I love gaming, I'm not a historical guy, and I listened to the show and actually enjoyed it. So,
I'm glad.
Yeah, no, it was good stuff. It was excellent stuff. So we'll make sure and put a link to the show in the description of this one, so you guys can get to it and check it out. Like I said, if a non-historical guy can listen to it and enjoy it, then you guys are doing something right.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, now that originally I thought we were going to do some little podcasting magic and do something out of order and have me eat something before we jump into the meat. Excuse me, the meat of the thing. I'm going to wait for the smoke to clear before I try to cook anything downstairs. Thankfully, I'm upstairs. Let's slide into our anticipating epic conversation. So we had some previews. I thought it was weird how they dropped and by the way, it's going to be delayed announcement, because it was kind of like, wasn't it at the end of like a...
Yeah, it was at the end of a preview section as like a little like 8-point font, like, by the way, this is definitely not coming when we thought it was coming. It'll be here this year, maybe.
Yeah, it was like at the end of an article about the Solar Auxilia, like rapier support weapons or something like that.
Yeah,
it was weird how it went.
It was a very weird sort of like, it was not an independent announcement.
Right. Right.
And yeah, all of that makes it seem a little bit like something very bad happened.
Yeah.
In a way that was like, oh no.
Yeah.
It was also definitely like, yeah, it's coming, just not yet.
Right.
Which is usually not a like, hey guys, it's been delayed a week. Like,
right.
Yeah, so something went wrong somewhere.
Yeah, your explanation on our Discord server was the best. You were like, yeah, container fell in the ocean. And I liked how people immediately were like, "Where did you read that?"
I'm like, no, guys, I'm making things up.
Well, at any rate, now again, man, I hope the sensible Brian doesn't take over here, because this is getting a little old. But in a way, I was relieved when that happened, because I was like, okay, that gives me time. Now that I'm committing to going, I'm getting some more people to go to that event up in Chico in November. That's going to be my equivalent of going to a convention. Like, that's what I have time for. It's a drive. I can split it with guys. We can, rent an Airbnb or something like that and get away for a weekend or whatever it is. So it gives me a little bit of time to, first of all, finish out these World Eaters that I have. I'm almost done with everything that I own. Once I am done with everything that I own, no, I'm not going to get into that. Look at me being sensible again. But also I was like, okay, I can finish, because my goal was to try to finish up my Furians. I don't know if I can finish my Furians, but if I can get those 2 Warlords done, and have an Exterminus done, there are a lot of things that get opened up. Like I painted those 2 Warhounds because, a 3rd Warhound allows me to take my Iconoclast legally in a 1750 game. It's not a fun game. It's not a great game, but I can. It also opens up, if I use the Direwolf as the 5th Warhound, which I'm not excited about, but that allows me to play a Lupercal, right? So it's like, now I'm finally at the point with my collection where I can just start adding 1 Titan all of a sudden opens up multiple mana pools.
Yeah.
And with this getting pushed out a little bit, I think that's actually good, because it also lets me get into, my meetings and, meeting with new students and stuff started this week, but my teaching year starts tomorrow. And the summer was, I mean, since we recorded last time, the summer was really good to me as far as just me having those giant aha moments and realizing that, yeah, you don't have time for everything. You got to shave down to the stuff that you really enjoy and do that. And, painting my World Eaters and finishing up my Furian stuff is where I'm at right now. So I think that if the Furians are closer to done and all my World Eaters are painted that I purchased, then I'm going to feel okay about doing that. When Epic comes out, getting into it.
Yeah, I confess I was a little bit at peace with it too. For I think very similar reasons. I was sort of worried because essentially when we thought this was going to come out was about a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And I was definitely having a like, Yeah, but I still need to paint Titans for Nova.
Yeah.
And like, but it's not the Titans that are going to show up in Epic, because like
Yeah.
no one's first game of Epic is going to be like, and I brought a War Master Titan. Because that's,
Yeah.
that's going to be not fun for someone. We're not sure who yet, but it's going to be not fun for someone. And so like I think I'm sort of at peace with it because it is coming. They have been doing some previews that I think are buying them time, looking at different aspects of things, night households
Hmm.
and things like that, confirming what I always
Yeah.
suspected, which was that no, the Armigers did not come out for Adeptus Titanicus. They came out
Right.
for Epic a couple
Right.
years before Epic came out.
Right.
Um, but like similarly, I'm telling myself that this will get me, sort of bookend. Like, okay, I've got 3,000 points of Adeptus Titanicus. I've got Titans of every scale. I am also at that place where, like, with a painted warlord, you start being like, okay, if I had another warlord, I have a Regia Maniple. That's kind of a cool idea.
Right.
So like you can do sort of that stuff, and then also for me, working on terrain for 8mm scale,
Yep.
getting that. I've got a couple sort of work in progress terrain boards that I think will get a little bit more work in progress if I can, have an extra month. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit disappointed because I love me a good Epic, but also it's, I think, not the worst thing in the world to have it delayed a little bit. I'm super curious as to what happened to it, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
Even knowing what happened to it, I mean, the end result is it's still not here.
Yeah,
I'm not that worried about it. And there were leaks where people were saying, oh, this is the link, you can look at the entire rules. I made sure to not do that because I want to have the whole brand new game experience. But
yeah,
even in like, title pages and things like that, table of contents, as you're looking at it, if you played Epic back in the day, even Epic Armageddon or Space Marine, whatever, you're seeing a lot of familiar stuff, and you're seeing stuff that what you loved about the game as far as like the phases and all the different things. So I think the elements are there. I mean, clearly the game is going to be supported from a model standpoint, and the larger scale I think is really going to help pull some people in, because 6mm, well, nominally it was 6mm. There were some 4s and probably 8mm scale things in the old Epic version, but the scale is going to bring people in. And I mean, it also helps to kind of explain, like the Titanicus terrain kits have been out for a while, and it explains where, I mean, they do have production concerns as far as, when they can make stuff. But I mean, they've already previewed an article showing that they're going to have terrain sets and things like that. So I'm really excited for it. And this falls into the theme of, I think, what I was talking about last time. And this has been like my 2023 theme, is like realizing that not everything is for you, and not everything is something that you can do or have to do, which sounds dumb. But I got to play a game of Aeronautica, right? So I painted up all those Sons of Horus. I have one of everything you can have except for the Thunderhawk, which is the only one I hadn't finished. And admittedly, like Josh was trying to tell me, he was like, no, you played the worst mission. We just played a dogfight. We did a team one. I played with Jody and Josh against Craig, who's a great, super fun local player. And I played the game and I was like, I'm not a hex guy. I'm not a pick my maneuvers before the turn and then do that. And then the real coup de grace was the you hit on a 5-up, and then in any game where you hit a third of the time, or it can go to 6s if you're off in elevation by 1. For me, it just the chance of a really swingy round of shooting just comes in, and it's just, I like small games, but it's just, there isn't room for that small game in my collection, or mainly in my time. And originally I thought I might do Sons of Horus for Epic, but then after reading Betrayer I had to count 8th time. It is better the 8th time you read it. I have to do World Eaters with the Ember Wolves. Like I have to do it for Epic. I don't
yeah,
care that I play World Eaters in 40K 30K and now in this. I don't care. So I mean, it's good. I'll be able to. I'm hoping that I can just sell those. I mean, they're really well painted. I used the Forge World transfers and put a lot of time into them, and I really like the way that they turned out, and I could see myself enjoying an epic army. But realistically, I'm going to have time to play one, and if I have to play one, I'm probably going to want to play World Eaters. So
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Aeronautica is a sort of a strange game for me. I have a lot of the same sort of issues with it. The to hit chance, and especially with altitude. I played a couple games with a local player who I 3D printed some Necron flyers for him. And that's amazingly frustrating because their maneuver is just like, then the Necron plane is somewhere else and there's nothing you can do about it.
yeah,
So I got a lot of work done with Marauder Destroyer turrets, just like sort of like, I don't know, man, just fly in a straight line and shoot anything you can see.
somebody's going to see something.
Somebody's going to see something, and then it's going to die. So it's an interesting game. I think there's some potential there, but I think Campbell over on the 40K Badcast had a comment on his Discord that like Aeronautica Imperialis is a great game I play once a year. And that's sort of my feeling on it. Is it's definitely not like a core game for me. No. And yeah, if you're going to play World Eaters, paint your tiny planes like World Eaters.
Yeah.
And that sounds cool. And I think you will be able to sell off with Epic coming like, hey, you want a really nice air support wing for your Sons of Horus? Yeah. And then like similarly, as much as I sort of, chuckle that you play World Eaters and everything, I'm looking up how to paint 8mm dudes with Imperial Fist contrast for a reason. And like, yeah, play what you love.
You suffer when you deny your essence.
Exactly.
That's all that I can say. So that's that. So yeah, I mean, so far everything that we've seen, I mean, the rules look like they're going to work. The timing getting moved actually is good for me. The tank squadrons, everything just looks good. And the thing that I like seeing is just looking at locally here in the Bay Area, there's a Horus Heresy group, and they have a section just for Epic, and there's just a lot of excitement for it too. You know, because I mean, Heresy tends to target older gamers, and older gamers a lot of people like Austin that we were talking to. That's how he got into 40K, was he played Epic first. I was one of the weirdos that really didn't play it until after it had kind of gone its course. Just because the area that I lived in, people had money for 40K and that was it. So you just didn't having a second army just wasn't a thing where I grew up. It was a little down the income scale. So yeah,
I think it also, the nice part about Epic, and I think why a lot of people are excited for Epic, is it doesn't compete directly against 40K except for time. Like one of the things you always see with the relationship between Horus Heresy and 40K is towards the end of an edition, when everyone is a little bit tired of 40K and the rules have gotten a little bit bloated, suddenly everyone's interested in Horus Heresy. That lasts for about 6 months, and then GW announces something, and the 10th edition previews start, and suddenly the 5 Horus Heresy gamers in your area have dwindled down to like 2. Whereas I think Epic gets you a very different feeling of like, yeah, but 40K doesn't let me put like 50 tanks on the field. So
right. Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into this when we get into the things we like about the new 40K edition. I mean, at least paperwork wise, you're lugging around less stuff. And for this game, I mean, even though like when you look at the points that were released that you saw, like armies are still going to be big. Like people keep thinking like, oh, you're going to get the starter box. That starter box is like you've dipped like half of your toe. You haven't dipped your entire toe in. Like it's going to take some stuff to play this game. But thankfully, everybody's starting out at the same point, and that community involvement is something that always helps you to get people going. Like if a group of people are all painting stuff and it's all coming out at the same time, there's only 2 armies, initially. So it's not, some people might be waiting for Mechanicum or something like that, but people are generally going to want to get in with Space Marines because when you talk about the Heresy, those are the poster children for it. So it's what you got to go with.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of people are excited for Space Marines just because, old Epic and Heresy. I have a lot of folks in my area who are excited for the Solar Auxilia side of it because, Like
Yeah.
there's a strain of 40K player who's just a treadhead,
Yep.
and like, hey, do you want to just put a bunch of Lehman Russes out? Is like,
Yep.
hell yeah, I do. And it's like, fair enough.
Yeah.
We've got a game for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think folks will. I think it'll be a good time, and I think that sort of communal, like, hey, yeah, we're trying to build stuff. Okay, what are you doing? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Someone in my local club's doing Iron Warriors, and I'm like, fuck yeah, like let's do this.
So what is, to kind of close us out on this, what is something that they haven't previewed that you want to see the game come out with?
That's a really good question. So you touched on it with Mechanicum, because I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a really good opportunity to bring out the weird shit that they do. That
Yeah.
you have weird war machines and things like that. The other thing that I'm hoping to see is actually a product for not Epic, which is I would like to see a Adeptus Titanicus Final Compendium that just sort of
Oh,
wraps up that, because I think, like Aeronautica, I think Titanicus's support is either going to slow or come to a standstill.
yeah,
And to be fair, I'm sort of at peace with that. Titanicus
absolutely.
is a game that doesn't need a whole lot else to it.
Right.
So I'd like to see like a compendium of like, no, seriously, here's all the points. Here's some, random cool mission shit. And like maybe Ordo Sinister Titans that aren't warlords and like corrupted night houses, and just be
Mhm.
like, okay, this is it. We are
Yeah.
bookending this game.
Yeah.
I would like them to do that. So that's my like thing I would actually genuinely like, is for them to close the book on Titanicus and say,
Yeah.
here is this game,
Yeah.
and actually finally put an FAQ out for like the 10 million questions that people have generated that they
True.
have never answered.
True. Yeah. It was funny because before, a couple weeks before this thing, um, two things happened that made me unfortunately get back into the game. One, a base that I'd been looking at for a long time went on clearance, and then Fender's website, they put the clearance price, it was 20% off, but they put the clearance price as a list price, so it was like 20% off of 20% off. And when you do the math on that one, 36% off of a base that I've been wanting for a year anyways, couldn't say no to it. So did that. I was in the doghouse a little bit, but not too bad. Then we did our taxes and owed substantially more than I thought we would. And so it was funny because right around that time, the one person that I still paint for, just every once in a while, off and on, he's a dad up in he has 3 kids. He lives up in Portland, so he doesn't get a lot of time to game either. But he was like, "Hey, how would you feel about painting some Titanicus stuff for me?" And I was just like, "Bring it on!" But he was concerned that he was like, "Well, do you think they're going to pull the plug like they did for Aeronautica?" Now, technically, Aeronautica hasn't had the plug pulled on it, but you can only play heresy units, which are things that they're still making for the other game. And that what you just said, what you wanted to see for Titanicus, was kind of like what I told him. I was like, I don't think we're going to see new stuff. That I think that, but there's enough stuff that's out, and they'll need those planes anyway. So as long as you have the rules and you have the boards, the hex boards to do it, you're going to be able to play it. You're going to be able to play Titanicus, right? Or Aeronautica. And I think that Titanicus is going to be the same way. Is that even though Epic will be the new hotness, if it's anything like Epic was before, it's a different enough game that I am still going to want to play Titanicus separately.
Yeah.
And all the models, they're going to need the models anyways for the Epic version of the game. So you're not going to run out there. And not only that, even if they did stop making the models, I have everything I need for Furians, period. Like, I'd like to add one more Warhound just so I can have a full Lupercal without having to, brace myself on the thick chicken crutch. But, like, it's good. And I am really at peace. Like, I like having a game where it's like, I don't have to worry about things changing every 15 minutes, or if I don't have a thing, the new hot thing, I'm left in the dust. And so I think it's good. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I think I need an Iconoclast, and then realistically, I could paint Titanicus for like the next 4 years and
Yeah.
not buy anything new.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I don't have is a War Master. And for Furians, I don't care. I have an Iconoclast. That's fine. I don't need the big shooty one.
That's why
I,
I
I
ended
don't
up
like
with a
playing
War
it.
Master instead of an Iconoclast. Is I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I was building the War Master and was like, I want a second one of these.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but I don't need a second shooty one because when
No.
on Earth are you going to field 2 War Masters?
Never.
Both of which are shooty.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, but like you could have one with a big sword. And that sort of, I was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And a giant grav claw. I don't care what.
Yeah.
It
And
doesn't
then
matter.
I messaged Sky and he was like, no, they're out of stock and have been out of stock for ever. And I was like, okay, we'll just bide my time.
Well, speaking of biding time, I'm going to have to figure out a quick way. We're going to take a break here. On the other side, we're going to do a quick little mini segment here. And Eric is going to tell me what I'm eating, and I'm going to eat British condiments. And we'll see how this works. Or if it works. Or there might not be a second half to this episode of something on there. Like apparently one of the things, I guess the tagline is you either love it or you hate it. And we're going to find out which camp I'm in on the other side. Okay, so I made it down to my kitchen. It still smells like burnt French fries. My smoke alarm is unplugged with the battery yanked out of it so it doesn't interrupt the recording at all. And I have 3 things here. Now, Neil sent these to me. There was some chat in our Discord thing, and he said something about English mustard. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck that is. What the fuck is English mustard? And he was like, holy shit. And he messaged me and he's like, I have to send you some. And he's like, I'm going to send some other stuff too. Try it out and tell me what you think. And of course, I figured this is something we have to do on air. I mean, this feels like a bad reality TV thing or something, but I have English mustard. I don't know if that's a broad category or if there are subcategories of that or whatever it is. Eric, you have the information. You'll tell me what I'm eating after I've eaten it. I have HP sauce. I thought it was H because I guess it's made by Heinz. I thought the H was from that, but you were saying in between here that it has something to do named after Parliament, and which makes sense because I mean,
apparently the creator heard a rumor that his sauce was being served in one of the restaurants in the Houses of Parliament, so changed the name to HP sauce. Subsequently, it was bought out by Heinz and is now manufactured in the Netherlands because global capitalism.
Sure. Okay. And I guess Brexit hasn't done anything with that. Now, the final one and the controversial pick. So I was over at Jody's house. He had been struggling to paint Titans, and I was like, hey, we'll go out to breakfast. I'll go to your house. We'll paint. His wife, Aaliyah, is as awesome a person as Jody is. Apparently, I did not know this about them. I knew they were foodies. I didn't know that she was a condiment person. So all the stuff that I'm mentioning, she had in her refrigerator. And I said, yeah, there's English mustard. And she's like, do you like mustard? I love mustard of all kinds. Oh, she's like, okay, you're going to love that. I was like, HP sauce. Okay. All right. And then I said the third one, we'll save this for the closer, Marmite. I don't know what the fuck this is, but when I said it, they both cocked their heads and looked and both said, oh, really? So I guess Neil told me the tagline is you either love it or you hate it. So we'll save that one for last. So I'm going to try not to chew into the microphone because it's not like nails on a chalkboard, but I just want to get my reaction and do it. So I'm eating the mustard the way I normally would. This is I've got wheat bread, English mustard, heavy on both sides, a ghost pepper cheese, and sharp cheddar with spinach, uncooked spinach. So this is a regular cheese sandwich with mustard. This is my normal thing. So let's see what the hell this is. This has to have horseradish in it.
So I could not actually find a formal definition of English mustard. So instead, I will present you with a quote from the National Mustard Museum. Quote, "The English have always loved their mustard."
Wow.
So it appears that English mustard is the English take their mustard seriously.
Wow. So the one thing I'll say on it, it has like it's a lot saltier than I'm used to for a mustard. So it definitely has like a strong salt taste to it, but it has like a real like horseradish kick to it. So English mustard, I'm behind. The salt might be a little heavy because it leaves like an aftertaste on the back of the throat. But I'm making lunch tonight for my first teaching day tomorrow. I'm just gonna make a sandwich with this stuff. So this stuff's a go. I'm into it. All right, let's get the HP sauce. See if the fuck I got to snap the seal here. I probably should try to take a pull, take a little. All right.
This is described by Wikipedia as, quote, "a British brown sauce."
Yeah, it's got a little. Yeah, I can see that. All right, let's get a little. Unfortunately, it was supposed to go on fries, but it's going to have to go on toast because shit's on fire, yo. All right, let's try it. It's like if you made... This tastes like if you made, like... What the hell is the sauce? What's the British sauce? The, is it Worcestershire sauce?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. If you made it thicker, that's what this is. It's what it smelled like.
Yeah. So the primary ingredients are tomato, vinegar, and tamarind extract. Appropriately,
tamarind.
Two of those three do not come from England.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I've had HP sauce before. I like it.
Yeah. Tamarind.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then a bunch of other spices.
I'm not going to waste a bunch of recording time like trying to eat it and find the taste in there, but yeah, actually in the aftertaste you can taste that a little bit. And yeah, people, I think it's funny when we rip on British food all the time. And the fact is, it's like, you can't be a colonial power at some point and not rip off a bunch of food ideas, you know? So like the tamarind thing. Yeah. Okay. Here comes the controversial one. Okay. Here we go with Marmite. What the? Okay. It's an interesting consistency. I'm not sure what that looks like. All right, I'm going to take a little pull here, take a little sniff. I can't tell what the fuck I just smelled. Okay. Well, if nothing else, it's vegan, so let's see what it does. It's a lot thicker than it looks when you open it. What the fuck? Neil said to put it on buttered toast, so let's see what it does. Jesus Christ, that's thick. I'm still picturing Jody and Aaliyah looking at me like, "Oh, really?" All right, here we go.
He's chewing real slow, y'all.
That is the saltiest shit that I think I've ever eaten. I don't mean shit in a bad way. Just it's... Wow. That is a fucking strong flavor. What the fuck is in this?
So what is in this is best described by how it's made. Marmite is a spreadable yeast extract invented by German scientist Justin von Liebig. How you make yeast extract is you take the yeast byproducts from brewing, you dump a shit ton of salt in it to make all the yeast cells rupture, and then you sieve out the cell walls. And so what this is salt and the goo from inside yeast cells.
So the closest thing that I have to it is there's a Japanese sauce that if you were able to concentrate the shit out of it and add a bunch of salt to it, that would be it. How is this eaten? Do people like eat this
on toast? Just
you're having toast and you're like, well,
it's just a spread. If you thought what I need is a salty bread. It is extremely
Jesus.
high in B vitamins.
Okay. Okay.
So a lot of it is it's a decent nutritional supplement.
Wow. So, and I guess you can't make it less salty, really, because you need that to make the yeast
how yeast extract is made is salt. I suppose the other way you could do it is sugar, and I think that would be gross.
Yeah, the sugar. Yeah, if you were to take the sweetness and crank it like the salt is in this, there's absolutely no way. So, wow. So, I don't know that this will be a daily thing that I do on my toast, because I think my gums would actually hurt from how much salt is. When I eat too much salt, my gums actually hurt. But it's not as scary as I thought it would. But holy shit, yeah, you either are into this or you are not into this. So that's a thing.
It is definitely, at the very least, an acquired taste. I know very few people who have had it, and their first bite have been like, "Oh hell yeah!"
Yeah, like the English mustard, I'm all over that. Like it was salty for me. Like the salt was real high. The HP sauce, I definitely I could see this. Like I need to play around with it a little bit. I could see this going on stuff. This stuff, I mean, it worries me that you don't have to refrigerate it too. You know, this is kind of like the being afraid.
Well, it's salty enough that nothing's growing in it.
Yeah. Okay. I hope this all works through my system okay, because I don't want a rough start tomorrow when I have to teach my classes for the first time. So, well,
sampling British condiments is how we lost Brian.
It was a good run. Well, Neil, thanks for sending me this stuff. I'm actually talking to a few people locally because I'm trying to figure out what kind of stuff I need to send back your way, because I have to return the favor, because I mean, this is just fun to do. If anybody lives in, initially I was going to say if anybody lives out of the country and there's like some sort of a regional condiment or something, and you want to do some kind of an exchange, have me try it or whatever it is. Like I love trying new stuff. I hate to open it up to the US, but I mean, let's face it, like there are like 10 different countries in the United States, as far as when it comes culturally to food and things like that. But at any rate, well, hey, this has either been great radio or terrible radio, but I'm going to have the taste of Marmite. That is going to stick in the back of the throat for a while. So we'll take a break here, and then we're going to go into our cold take on 40K. Okay, meat of the topic. Now that the taste of
now
Marmite
that Brian's got the salt
slowly,
out of his system.
now that the Marmite is slowly working its way out, and my gums are bleeding. 10th edition. So there were a lot of hot takes. People have gotten some games in. A lot of stuff to cover on this. We're going to try to keep this tight and succinct here, just to kind of give our thoughts on it. So, thoughts on the rollout. I thought the hard reset was good for the game, because even though it's close enough to the previous edition, there was enough stuff, the mechanic of command points and stratagems and all this sort of stuff. I think it was good to do the hard reset, just so that everybody was sort of, well, in theory, everybody was on the same page. Just some pages were made out of much more durable or shinier paper than others to get going. Eric, what were your thoughts on the initial rollout of it? So they give us all the indexes for free. They announce it's coming. We've had some support. There was a hiccup with this, with some printing things or whatever it was. But what are your general thoughts before we dive into specific areas?
Yeah, so I thought the rollout was pretty good. I will confess, up to the rollout, I had sort of lost interest because of the amounts of sort of salt and grumbling that people had about a game they hadn't seen yet.
Yeah.
But I like the hard reset. I think if 8th edition had done indexes as well as this edition did, I would have played a lot more 8th edition. The indexes here, yes, they're indexes, yes, they're sort of stripped down, but they still got a lot of character to them. You've got army-specific stratagems that mean your guys play like you feel like they should. And I've really actually enjoyed the rollout for this, and I've been enjoying Index Hammer, which was not true for 8th edition. So yeah, I think the rollout's been pretty solid, all things considered.
Yeah. Now I wonder if because my impression would have been, I do agree that they did a better job at trying to bring the flavor out in these, but as far as like the quality of the indexes themselves and balance, I thought they did a better job in 8th edition, but that might also be, I was just, as you were saying that, it threw me off a little bit, but then as I was thinking about it, I was like, I was playing primarily Dark Eldar and Dark Eldar, Drakari, whatever they were at that point. The 7th edition Codex was a dumpster fire. It was a horrible book. So maybe the whole thing where I felt like things were balanced was that I wasn't playing with a book that was terrible. Because I remember we started Splintermine around when that Codex dropped, and I remember when it did, and we got it, and we're hyped about it, and hey, we're going to do this show, and then looked at the Codex and we're like, oh fuck, we're going to be polishing a turd here for a while. But yeah, I thought the 8th edition indexes were good, but yeah, I thought doing it that way, having everything available, I thought having the cards out was also a good move as well, because it really did lend itself to, no, really, we're going to, all the abilities that you're really going to need fit on a card for a unit. And that really helps people with starting out. So, I mean, even though you can print the things out, I bought them, because one, it supports, the local store, Herrick Games up here. And also because I like having reference cards. And I think them also being upfront and transparent about, here is our schedule for the codexes for the next year. And the next army that I really have to care about would be Chaos Space Marines. And that's like next summer, so. Yeah,
I do like having been told how far in advance I need to worry about things.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I was concerned about, or that I didn't like about the release was, so I got the basic rule book. I didn't get the Leviathan set because for once I looked at the starter and I was like, I don't need more Space Marines that I'm not going to paint. I definitely don't need Tyranids. And I'll just buy a $50, $60 book. I'm okay with that. And when I got the book, the thing that I was really surprised with is that Crusade wasn't in there in any sort of meaningful way. And then the other thing was, I knew that they were going to have this Drunken Commander deck that you could use or not use. And, I was going to buy that anyways, just because I like having Drunken Commander. I like having the cards and those sorts of things. But I was really surprised that, well, when they announced that they were having to recall them because there was a card that was misprinted or something like that, I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll get the book, and the book will have the tables in it, where we can just play and do that. And even if I didn't play any games with those, I just wanted to see what the secondaries look like, so I could figure out because you can look at a unit and figure out how it's going to perform on the table, but you have to look at mission design and figure out, how am I going to score points? And the fact that that wasn't in the basic rule book really threw me for a loop. I mean, I'm okay with it, but it threw me off that wasn't in there. So it was a little harder for me to get into the game initially, because I like to read about how, before I go to play my first game, I had no idea what the secondaries look like. So I just took an army. I'm like, this looks like an army, and started playing the game. And the game that I had, we actually had, we drew some special mission condition or something where we had 3 instead of 2 at once. And we were playing the discard part of it wrong. And so I thought you had to, spend 1 to get rid of any of them or whatever it was. And there were some ones that showed up that I was a little iffy on. There were some things that I'm like, this looks like actions. And I would have been very comfortable with actions going away completely. But once I get the deck, I've got it ordered. Once I get that, I think I'll be okay to go. Yeah, I don't know. It was different.
So in contrast, a thing that I was taken surprised by that I really liked is I did buy the Crusade book, Leviathan or whatever it's called, because I'm running our local sort of Crusade game, and that has the core rules in it. It's missing the combat patrol rules, but I haven't actually cracked the core book because I haven't needed to.
Right.
And that's, I read, that's not true. I read through it once to see what was in there, but the answer is Crusade's not in there. And importantly, in the Crusade book is just the full-fledged rules, which was really nice.
Yeah.
to be able to just have that. I have played a game with the Drunken Commander deck. It's fun. It's a lot like last time, but yeah, it's a little surprising that there's not like a table or something where like if you don't have the cards, you don't have the method of play,
right?
Which is sort of strange to me.
Really, which is really weird. And that was a thing that I wish. That was one thing that I wish that they would have announced a little earlier. Is that if I would have known that the mini version of the rule book, if I would have known that the it wasn't in the main rule book, that you didn't have the mission generator thing or the secondaries, all that sort of stuff, and that the only difference between the little mini rule book and that is just about 50 pounds, it feels like, and a lot of shiny pictures, I would have just not bought the main rule book, period.
Yeah.
I mean, as it stands, I ended up ordering the smaller book because I don't need all that stuff. I really don't. In fact, I think if I run into somebody that is getting into the game that's tight on a budget, I'll probably just give them the basic book because I don't. It's lost money at this point. I don't need it and I don't want it. You know.
Yeah, mine lives at the club house now.
Yeah. So one thing that I will say, so there are mechanics that really work. Well, I'll save this one for later because when we get into like the actual units and things like that, there are parts of this that I feel like they did really well that I was really happy to see. So like the play testing bit that I did was only until 8th or only through 9th rather. Sorry. And it wasn't even it wasn't the end of it. So a lot of this stuff is like stuff that I'm seeing brand new but we kind of knew that there were things that directions they were starting to move in. And when I looked at all the new data slates and things like that, the way that they're laid out, the restricted number of, relics and things like that, all this stuff started making sense. Like all of it looked like the stuff they were talking about and ways of the game that I really wanted to see the game go. So getting into the mechanics, Eric, what's stuff that works for you with the mechanics of this one? Because like you were mentioning that 9th wasn't too hot of a thing for you. What in 10th edition do you feel like?
So there's some stuff I really like in 10th edition. One is what I have referred to as power level is dead, long live power level. Army construction is just not hard.
Right.
And it's fast, it's streamlined. I think you avoid sort of the newbie trap of like, well, why does this guy have a plasma pistol? And it's like, because all the cool guys have plasma pistols, and like, oh, but you really shouldn't pay for a plasma pistol. Like, all of that's better. The app is pretty good. And what I really like is the idea that they have the sort of core concept of your detachment comes with like an army special rule, a couple of enhancements, and some stratagems. And then if you want something different, you replace that detachment with another detachment. And so like, sure, if someday in the future they have like a, I don't know, Sisters of Battle Penitent Crusade that has all this stuff, it's not piled on top of, you swap it out. And I really like that because one of the things I found myself catching myself saying the most in 9th edition was, surely I have a stratagem to do something about that. And then flipping through 3 pages of stratagems. Versus like, I've been playing with the Eldar, all the stratagems are on one card, and I just sort of flip through them and go, like, I sort of know what they all do now. And they're a little bit more general. I like that a lot. I think it's the combination of those two has made it a thing where you can understand your army pretty well, and you have a shot at least the broad strokes of someone else's army. Whereas like, I always thought it was both frustrating for me and then probably unfun for my opponent, or vice versa, to be like, yeah, that cool thing you want to do, somewhere in the 18 stratagems I have, I can foil that. And you definitely haven't read all those pages. And so I do like that they have streamlined that, but enough of that has flavor. The Sisters of Battle is all, you thought you killed me, but secretly you didn't, and things like that. The Eldar one is all movement and penalties to hit and shenanigans. So they all feel sort of like they're supposed to. And then I think that the core stratagems, there's more of them. And so there are,
A
I
lot
think,
more, yeah.
there's a common toolkit that I found myself drawing on those a lot. Tank shock
Yeah.
ribs. But,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of things like that. But I think that's a lot of it, is that right now, simplified army construction, we have there down as less lugging the library. Like the Crusade book and my card deck, which for the Eldar is a little hefty. It's probably runner up to the Space Marines one, which is a literal brick. But there's just not that much stuff to take to a game.
Right. So also a thing that I know they wanted to do that they did, thankfully. I mean, there were a lot of things in 8th edition. I mean, you had things like Reaver jet bikes, the little eviscerating flyby thing that turned into a stratagem instead of just being a ability that was on the data slate, which I understand the reason for it. It added like this extra resource management thing, but there was a lot of stuff that I really just wanted to see go away, and reducing the number of command points and that whole thing, and command point farming and all this, all that sort of nonsense. I mean, there's still ways to get stuff back. I mean, some factions do have things where you can get points back or different things like that, but it's not as prevalent as it was before. So that part was definitely good. Were there any units that didn't get that for you, or is it still?
So there's one canonically that didn't get it for me that makes me sad. Which is Sisters Repentia. Their fight on death ability is still a stratagem, and importantly, it's a 2 command point stratagem.
Wow.
So it's a spendy one. Now the good news is that it's any Sisters unit, so you can apply it to things that aren't Repentia. Although Repentia are the hard hitting Sisters that are likely to die, so I think that's where most people will end up reaching for that. The frustration I have with that is twofold. One is, as I mentioned, it's an expensive stratagem. And the other one is, because it's a stratagem, it turns off in boarding actions. Because you're drawing from a very limited stratagem sort of set. And Repentia are way worse if they can't fight on death. Because they're fragile as hell. The other thing I will say is that while I like them moving unit abilities to data cards instead of being stratagems, I would like whoever's currently designing rules at GW to take into their heart that it is sometimes okay for units not to have special abilities.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because there's definitely a little bit of a not everybody needs an and also attached to their rules. Sometimes it can just be the stat line.
Yes. Or just, they have 6 up, feel no pain, which is enough to almost give you hope and irritate you when you have to roll dice and it doesn't work. But and then also too, I mean, the I haven't noticed it in games as much, but vehicles definitely are tougher. But I feel like shooting, this is the thing. Close combat is not what it used to be. I mean, you have to be really good at close combat for close combat to actually do something now, or at least in my limited experience. Things that used to be, okay or serviceable in close combat are not pulling it off. And so I feel like people are leaning into shooting even more than last edition. If that makes any sense. I don't know if your games have looked like that. So
that's been my experience too.
Yeah. So I don't know that. And I don't know if that's something that will get deadlier as we go on. I still haven't gotten a game in with my World Eaters intent. So I can't tell you. I mean, their rules look like they actually have stuff because there's so many things where they get to, additional attacks or, with their not blood tithe system that they have, there's ways that they can sort of juice up and do their thing, which is good because that's the one phase of the game they're supposed to really do something. But I just don't feel like I from the games that from my little playing and what games I've also watched, I don't see a lot of stuff where I feel like vehicles are just dominating and destroying games at all.
I don't think so. I mean, I confess that right now I've been playing my Eldar mostly for the current Crusade, mainly because I want to play with a painted army.
Yeah.
And for there, my tanks are doing a lot of work, but that's admittedly because in my average army, I've got 3 at like 1,000 points. So like, yeah, the tanks are doing a whole bunch, but that's because most of the army is tanks. I think they're definitely addressable. I think the nice part about it is tanks do work. You're not in the like, 7th edition. Like, why did you bring something with an armor value? You fool.
Right.
So I think that does. I think one of the interesting parts of that is, while a bunch of the especially tank weapons got adjusted, so like, I don't remember what a Fire Prism's gun fires at, but I think it's like strength 18 or something. It's ridiculous. While a lot of that got adjusted, Melta didn't.
No.
Which means like I saw someone talking recently. They were complaining about they were struggling with their sister's army, and they're like, yeah, it's weak on anti-tank. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, retributors exist. And then I looked up like, what does a multi-melta do? And I'm like, oh,
what does it do? That's a great
you're wounding
question.
a lot of like the more serious tanks in the game on 5s.
Yeah.
So I think it that probably could have used a little adjustment. GW does have, I think, a tendency to forget that legacy stat lines also need to be reviewed from time to time.
Right.
And so that like that a Melta has been what it is forever doesn't necessarily mean that's what it should be. But I think that vehicles have been working. I think unless you skew heavily into them, they don't really dominate the game. But they are viable. They are there. And like a Land Raider should be scary. Like that should be a thing where like, Land Raider full of Terminators should be a thing rather than just an affectation of someone who really likes Land Raiders.
Yeah, the game. So one thing, especially for if I'm gonna try to aim for playing more like 1,500 point games, because 2,000 is just a lot now. Yeah. And for when I do have to run into a situation where the game I can get, somebody wants to do 2,000 points, I think I'm actually going to lean more into kind of instead of going with a lot of, foot infantry and small units and things like that, like I tend to kind of lean towards with like Dark Eldar and stuff. I think I'm actually going to start leaning into some, I bought a box of War Dogs, so in case I want to run 3 of those with my World Eaters, I can, just because just to lower the model count down, and get that part of it in it. But yeah, I totally agree on the Melta thing. Like you were mentioning that having to re-examine legacy stat lines. It's so true, because the whole thing last edition was like, oh, we're going to give Melta additional damage up close. Well, it wasn't enough damage to really get exciting. Like it did more, and it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't terrible. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, given that you're going to now start having Fire Prisms at strength 18, like if you're going to make a Melta gun, a lot of weapons got a bump in strength. So let's make it 9, strength 9 for a multi-Melta at long range. Keep its damage at whatever it was at. I'm fine with that. Make it to where when you're within half range, double the strength on it. Yeah. So even if you're not, I'd rather have doubling the strength so that it's more likely to do something at close range, to encourage you to do it, rather than, well, I got to wound first, and that's only going to happen this percentage of the time. Like a Melta gun point blank should be fucking terrifying. Yeah. And that's what I want. That's what I would want to see them do. So you're right. There is a thing where you're going edition to edition, and, multi-Meltas, if you go back to the Road Trader book, are strength 8, we're kind of stuck doing that. And
they did admittedly get bumped to strength 9.
Okay.
The problem is all the vehicles got their toughness bumped too.
Yeah.
So like if you're firing at a Space Marine, one of their sort of battle tanks, you're wounding on 5s.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing, is like it's this very weird gun now where like you're very dangerous if you hit. But like you're sorry, if you wound, but you're wounding Eldar tanks on 4s. You're wounding the tougher tanks on 5s. So it's like, oh man, but if you hit, they're fucked. But yeah, I would like to see them tinker with that a little bit and sort of examine how that works. Cause it's I think like you said, like a double strength would be sort of terrifying. Cause then it's like, okay, like, yeah,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
I'm wounding Eldar tanks on twos if we came piling
right,
out like right on
right,
top of you, and that's scary.
right. Yeah, and I just feel like it would help distinguish them a lot more. Other than this is a weapon, and when you're close, you get. Yeah, I mean they have great AP too, so I'm not going to
Yeah,
try to knock that. And then there's some other things too. Like twin linked las cannons, getting a reroll to wound, but giving it the exact same profile as a regular las cannon. I'm like, make this. That's fine, but I mean, if you made it like if las cannons are a 10, make it a strength 12 with a reroll against armored
yeah,
vehicles or something. Like give me a little something more than, well, it's the same thing as the other ones, but you get to reroll
yeah. I do think it's interesting
a
that they've now spent 3 editions trying to figure out what twin linked should mean, and they haven't quite settled on like, okay, so like we have
yeah,
seriously tried reroll hits, reroll wounds, and what if it's just 2 of this?
yeah,
And it appears none of these have fully satisfied their
yeah,
desires.
yeah. Uh, Another part of the game for me that I think works is that, and as soon as I read it, I was like, oh man, I'm waiting for the stuff where hopefully they don't. Sometimes they'll have a cool mechanic and then immediately start watering it down by making units that are immune to it, But I think morale mostly works from what I've seen. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know what your take is, but it's like you can legitimately, um, Chaos Space Marines can get being losing objective control and things like that is a big deal in this edition.
So morale, in the couple games I've played, hasn't really come up for me.
Mhm.
But that is largely because I've been playing fairly fragile armies against other fairly fragile armies.
Yeah,
So like it's hard to care about a battle shock test when 5 howling banshees just massacred like 8 sisters of battle.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then at the same time, those howling banshees are then immediately all killed.
yeah,
So there hasn't been a lot of morale tests, but I think as a mechanic, it's really cool. I think, like for example, that the wave serpent can trigger a battle shock test
yeah,
is like a really cool way to do some things. I think also it's not so powerful that I think trying to build your list around battle shock
yeah,
is probably not going to work well. But there are a
yeah,
couple units that have these great moments of like, yeah, okay, your enemy is at like -2 to battle shock test this turn. Hit him
hmm
really hard this turn.
yeah.
And so there are some things where I think I think it's interesting. I think morale is probably in the best place it's been for a bit because I can't actually remember the last edition of 40k where I was worried about morale at all.
hmm Yeah,
And like having started playing historicals games more, it's very strange to suddenly care about your units being like, nah, man, we're going
right,
home.
right,
Um,
right.
so it's been interesting. And similarly, objective control has been something that
Yeah.
I think has come up wide. So what's your experience with that been, Brian?
So far it's been fine. I haven't seen any. I mean, I playing Covens. The main thing with that game, I won't get into that game. The Because that game was a big like, oh, this is how missions are scored and mechanics clearly need to change and do these things. Um, so far from my games and games that I've watched, the sticky objective thing doesn't seem like it's that bad because most of the things that have it aren't that great to begin with. There's enough mobility. The table's still smaller than it was a couple editions ago, that you can't, even if something is, even if there's a sticky objective, you're able to um, get to it and reclaim it. So I think I like it as a mechanic. Um, and I like it because it allows you to play things a little bit differently. And it gives you another thing to sort of think about, and you can, I don't know. I don't have an aversion to it, I guess would be it. I mean, I think it's adding something to the game, but then again, I haven't played against a list where somebody has, I'm sure there's a way to like abuse the shit out of it and get obnoxious with it, but I haven't run into it.
Yeah, so I think my experience is pretty similar. I had, one game where there was a really kind of cool like can I kill enough people to sort of tip the OC scale in my favor and things like that.
Yeah.
I will say at some point I encountered on a forum somebody arguing about what is the OC value of a unit that's not
Jesus Christ.
there, and arguing whether 0 is greater than or equal to null. And I was just like, y'all playing it wrong. I don't care what your answer is. You're playing it wrong.
Yeah.
Go home.
But I remember I remember when you sent that to me, and I was just like, I fucking hate the world and don't want to
like
live
this
anymore.
is
for like 5 minutes.
You're all doing this hobby wrong. You may be playing the rules correctly. You're doing this hobby wrong.
Yeah.
Arguments to like how Python handles this are not actually things that should be brought up in a 40K rules discussion.
Right.
So yeah, but I haven't really seen anyone abuse it. It has been really interesting. Like, I played against a Drukhari player who had sticky objectives because of his Capelites. And like that allowed him to do some very cool sort of tactical things. And honestly stay in the game a lot longer than he should have facing a mechanized Eldar army. And so like that game we tied, even though like unit-wise I was wiping the floor with him because I was busy killing his dudes. I wasn't pushing into those objectives he held. And so he was just sort of still harvesting those objectives. And also, I've apparently played with only games with very sticky objectives because we had one of the Drunken Commander ones did have everybody get sticky objectives. And that was really interesting because, like suddenly Wind Riders are really interesting because like if I can hurl them across the board and capture an objective, you got to go back and get it.
Yeah.
And that's very different from like, okay, well, you get to advance into the objectives. Like, sure, you were doing that anyway. So I think it's been interesting. I think it's an interesting system, and it does, I think, clear up the always weird ambiguity of like, well, what is a Land Raider on an objective versus like a group of guards? Like, what does that? Who wins? The answer is like, there's a numerical value now. Just read it on the card.
Right. Yeah, and it encourages. I mean, you can take a really, an army that's all elite things, but I mean, if you're playing against a horde army that has, units with objective control too, then it's something you have to think about, and it's, I think it's a welcome addition. I don't know. Again, I haven't run into a really abusive combination or something where I felt like it destroyed the game for me. So for right now, I'm here for it and I'm okay with it. So, now, the section that I haven't seen because I didn't buy Leviathan, I haven't seen Crusade, which is really weird because that was the thing that I mainly looked at for like a year.
Yeah, you're just complete absence in the Crusade scene.
I have no idea what the fuck's going on in Crusade. In fact, I wrote in the notes, Eric, I don't have this because see Drukhari Commander deck rollout concerns above. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck's going on. You tell me.
So, I mean, there's some good news here. So Crusade missions are fun. At least the ones I've played. The guys and girls who wrote the Crusade missions, they don't want to give up actions. So there's some stuff in there that's still very clearly, it's a not action. It's a nominate a unit that can shoot. The good news is a lot of them don't have the sort of weird, this lasts until X unless interrupted. It's usually give up your shooting phase and do this thing instead. Okay. And so I'm sort of okay with it. It's been nice because like there are some things where it's like, okay, really does this unit of 5 Rangers have anything to shoot at? No. They'll sift around in the dirt looking for treasures instead. Why not? The main book has a ton of variety. It's got 15 missions in it. So that's really nice to see. In my opinion, agendas continue to be better than secondaries, because agendas let you get something even though you didn't win. And so I continue to really like the agenda system because they carry back from games, from game to game instead of, disappearing once you tally up who wins. There's a couple odd Crusade missions where they didn't quite, I think through their scoring. So they've got the sliding, like if you hold one objective, the defender gets 90 points and the attacker. And what you realize is the actual inflection point is, do you hold 2 or 3? If you hold
Yeah.
2, you lose. If you hold 3, you win. It doesn't really matter for anything else. So there's a couple of those that are like, there's a couple, I think there's one I read each direction that's like, the attacker needs to really win or the defender wins. And there's one where like the defender needs to really win or the attacker wins. But by and large, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the independent characters did a sort of their thoughts on 10th. And I think they didn't play Crusade much. And so I was a little bit yelling at my radio while they were going through that section. Because there's a little bit, guys, half of the things you asked for already exist. But
right.
I think there's some subtle changes to Crusade that some people have missed that I think will make Crusade a lot better. One of them is that super units are going to cost a lot more in terms of requisition points. So to get a regular non-character unit over 3 battle traits, you have to pay an additional amount, and that amount scales up the more of those you have. Similarly, with enhancements, giving one dude one enhancement is 1 requisition point. The next one is 2, and the next one is 3. So you can't do the thing that everybody, including me, did during Crusade, which is just every character gets a Warlord trait. Everybody's running around with relics, like just free shit Tuesday. It's much more like you're going to have to think about this. The other thing that does really good job, I think, toning things down is in the past in Crusade, if your unit whiffed their out of action roll, the easiest thing to do was just give up the XP they got for that game plus the small penalty and just go about your life. Now your choices are you lose a battle trait or you gain a battle scar. So like, I think what we saw is, especially early in the Crusade, a lot of people just drop my Falcon in its first Crusade game failed its out of action test, and I just went, okay, that Falcon's gone. And even if you have units that have okay, I'm up to sort of my maximum 3 battle traits. I really like the ones I got. If they fail their out of action roll, now you're talking about spending a requisition point to keep that battle scar off, or trying to deal with the fact that you're building up battle scars. So I think there's a really good sort of, I think there's a lot more ceiling on how ridiculous units will get. And I think that gets us to a better place where you don't have quite as many units running around with like 6 battle traits. And you're like, okay, so what does this do? And it's like, well, it fights twice. It also fights on death. Also 6s explode and mortal wounds on like 6s to wound. You're like, okay, can I just take my unit off? Because you win. So I think that Crusade's probably in a pretty good place. We haven't played enough of it to see what's really, really broken. And again, we haven't seen the Codex stuff. So like, I think what really overburdened Crusade was the sort of like yes and approach to Crusade that they had, where it was like, okay, here's your cool agendas. Here's some cool Crusade relics. Also, here's this entire other mechanical system that you need to keep track of, where those kept getting more and more complicated until I think you hit peak sort of the Imperial Knight Codex, sort of, I think, broke everyone with you get honor points that can then be turned into glory tokens. 5 glory tokens becomes and it's like, okay, what? No, I've lost you now. So I'm actually pretty sanguine about Crusade.
Good. Yeah, I'll be curious to see what the release schedule looks like, because I mean the first book that was out, like you're mentioning Leviathan, I mean the first 2 codexes that are coming out they're both in it. So I don't know if we're going to get another one when those 2 go, or if they're going to wait a couple of codexes in, or whatever the thing is. And I don't know. I'll probably, because again, I am playing more Titanicus anyways, and like the World Eater stuff that I'm doing, the games are going to be smaller for a while. So probably going to avoid Crusade for just a little bit. But I mean, it sounds like it's in a decent place. All the stuff that you said was all stuff that, I mean, I would have given a thumbs up to for sure. So
I think people's frustration with Crusade right now stems from frustration that would also take place if they were playing another type of game. It's not sort of Crusade focused. And the one thing I am hoping for and pretty hopeful about, because of the quality of the Leviathan book, is that, like in 9th edition, that narrative campaign stuff does appear throughout the whole release schedule, rather than just
Mhm.
their sort of fifth, sixth, and seventh esque, like,
Yeah.
oh hey,
Yeah.
we're about to close up the edition. Narrative, folks. Here's your 5 books. Okay, thanks for buying those. We're
Yeah.
done now.
Yeah.
That was always a little bit frustrating.
Oh
So yeah, I
man,
think Crusade's in a good place.
as soon as they announced that, Crusade was going to change and this, that, and the other, I took all of those Crusade books and recycled.
Yeah.
I was done with it. So, man, now I don't like to get, I mean, you are far better at analyzing data. This is your thing. You're far better at it. And statistics are always a weird thing to play with. Games Workshop released. Now, again, this is where numbers always need context, or it's just fucking numbers in a vacuum. They released the win rate according to tournament postings. And there's always a problem with this, right? Because let's go top of the list, let's go bottom of the list. Let's look at the bookends. Eldari are at the top win rate wise. Leagues of Votann are down at the bottom. Now, are there Eldari players that have in Leagues of Votann? What is this number? Is it 35% or something? 35%. I mean, that's fucking terrible. Now, that number is always going to be lower because if Votann are definitely, let's say that they are the hardest playing on hard mode, is there a top tier Eldari player that owns Votann that if you want to go to a tournament, you're going to take Eldari, right? The people that are showing up to a tournament with an army that when they look at it on paper, they realize is not good. They're doing it because they love the fucking army and they just want to do it, right? So we're always going to get skewed numbers with this thing. But with their guidelines where they've said, like, look, we want to have these win rates showing up at about 45 to 55%. Like if they keep everybody there, that's their little Goldilocks zone, right? Where everything is not too strong, not too weak. We're doing that kind of thing. My one complaint that I would have with this edition is just reading at it from a former, like, I used to look at this stuff and whatever and have to analyze it. It's very clear that there weren't a lot. I don't know if it wasn't that there wasn't a lot of eyes. I mean, I know they have less play testers now, which is fine because the leaks were getting to be bullshit to the point where it was, I can understand exactly why they did what they did. But when you see that 11 out of 26 are actually in the Goldilocks zone, right? And all of the rest are out of it. And 11 of the 14 or 15 that are out of the zone are in the sub not okay zone. There's a bit of a problem. And what I would point out with this thing is that there were a lot of things that right when I read them, even without having played a game or really looked at the mechanics, there were some of those things where I'm like, this is obviously a problem that made it through. So like the fate dice thing, getting to manipulate dice, like, yes, even making it once per phase, whatever the thing is, getting to change something to a 6 automatically where it starts triggering devastating wounds and all these other sorts of things. It's a problem. It's the Leagues of Votann thing from last edition, right? Where being able to change it did that. The Imperial Knights one, the Oath of the Moment, where there's one where I don't even sorry, that's the Space Marine one, the Code Chivalric, the one where they all have 6 up, feel no pain. That's their main thing that they do. But then all you have to do is kill the enemy warlord, and now you're getting, rerolls to hit and wound and all these. It's such an obvious, like, you don't even wait to read the second one. It's like such an obvious one that where when you compare that to like the Chaos Knights one, and this isn't because I own Chaos Knights, I own Imperial Knights, and I wanted to try to play them. When I read the rules, I was like, nobody wants to play me. So there were I think the balance on the indexes, like the individual units, I don't feel like there's too many of them that are too far out of whack. But some of the ones, these faction rules, I feel like these were like first round, like play testers would have looked at it and said, you need to tone this down. Like if you were to give me Oath of the Moment today, it's going to be far more devastating in a small game, because if you're playing, a 500 point game or whatever the thing is, when you declare a unit you're going to get rerolls to hit and wound, that's ape shit, because that could be 25% of their army. whatever the thing is. But even getting to choose one unit, I like the idea. You can see where the idea came from. The idea is coming from Space Marines are, they're outnumbered. This is a rapid response decapitation force. And I get that. But a rule like that, where the entire army just points at the one unit that needs to be deleted and wipes them off the board in a pretty easily, I think you could have made it, you select one unit that gets that. And it's still a fairly powerful, I don't know. But my read might have been different on it. I mean, what is your take on balance, I guess, so far?
So it's not great. Is my take on balance. And I think so something like Oath of Moment, I think you could have said like either like one unit gets this, or you select a unit, and that's the unit for not the turn, for the game.
Yeah.
So like, okay, that's the the warlord and his bodyguards. That's who we're really here for, etc. Mm-hmm. I think that there's definitely, like, if you look at the distribution for this, like there will always be armies that are better, and there will always be armies that are worse.
Sure.
Right now, the skew is pretty bad.
Yeah.
And there are some caveats to that. Your meta in your local area is not the national tournament meta. It's important to remember that when we look at things like Meta Watch, that is from national GT scale tournaments.
Right.
So like, don't give your local Gene Stealer cult player in your Crusade League a hard time because they're playing their union meeting that got a little bit out of hand. But right now there are some armies that are just really, really good, and there are some things where I don't understand how they thought this was a good idea. So like when they previewed Fate Dice, I was a little salty about it because I was like, oh, these are Miracle Dice, but better in every respect. And that's sort of what they've ended up being, playing Eldar. And like, the original version, I accidentally played one round where I forgot they had been revised, and I was like, man, these are really good. And then I was like, oh, it's because I'm playing them the old way. But even with that, you can do things like anything where you can just like guarantee something happens. So like, in the game I was playing against a Drukhari player, he brought a Solitaire, and that Solitaire got overwatched by a Fire Prism.
Right.
And I can guarantee I get a 6 to hit.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that Solitaire disappeared in a flash of blinding light.
And
it's like,
I get what they were going for, and it would be such an easy fix, so like in that situation, there should just never be any guaranteed anything.
Yeah.
In a dice game, it because everybody else is playing by that. When you break that out, I mean, first of all, you need a tiny bit of randomness. I mean, maybe you could like a fix for Fate Dice could be something as simple as getting to re-roll the dice to hit, or it could be, you declare it before you go to roll your thing to hit, and you're +2 to hit or something, or you get +1 to damage, and it would be fine. It would be serviceable, and it would be,
or it's still D3 that you could add to the roll or something like that.
But just,
I'm going to use a Fate Dice to add a little bit. So I'm more likely, but not guaranteed. I think
a Solitaire guaranteed getting shot in the face by a prism cannon is fucking nonsense. So
I think that there's definitely some problems there, but I think it's like some of it's the army-wide rules. Like I think right now what is keeping Space Marines going is Oath of Moment. I think if you got rid of that, I mean they're already in the not good zone. If you pulled that out from under them, I think they'd be hanging out with Votan. But I think there's other things like, and this is what I've been struggling with my Eldari, is just everything is good. Like, I've actually had a hard time. Like the army list I have right now is in the little app. It's named Grab Bag because it was just like, what is on my shelf that lets me see how all my units work, and it's real good.
Yeah.
And so every time I'm like, well, what if I swapped out what if I swapped out the Fire Prism for like a Crimson Hunter? And I'm like, okay. So you swapped out a Prism Cannon for a flying set of Bright Lances and a pulse laser. Like, aren't you nice? So there's I think a I'm really having trouble with my Eldari right now and figuring out sort of how to moderate that list
Yeah.
in a context where I don't own 60 Storm Guardians.
Right.
And can't
Right.
but I am back to the 6th edition, like how to make your opponents like you is like show up with Storm Guardians. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to just like pick the worst unit in the codex and be like, oh, hey, I
Yeah.
brought a bunch of those.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a struggle, and I think we're not in a good place. I'm
No.
hoping that the codexes help fix that. But I'm sort of telling myself that the indexes might not have gotten the very careful treatment because their indexes, they're not supposed to last all that long. But some of them are going to be around for like a year. And so I think there is definitely some work to be done. I will admit, as an Eldar player, right now I'm dreading the nerfs because they're gonna come hard, and they're not gonna just nerf it one way.
67% does not. Yeah, 67% does not fit in the Goldilocks zone. We'll just put it that way.
And they're gonna do a lot of raining in there, and it's gonna hurt. So I might switch to my sisters at that point. But yeah.
Well, I was gonna say let's switch to a positive thing, because a positive gear. What I had us pick some units that we felt. I mean, we're kind of up against it on time here because we're gonna get kicked off a Zencaster here, and I also have to get my classroom ready. Give me a couple of units that you feel were actually made playable by the edition, because I mean there were a lot of units where they did something that made them, it's a unit you wanted to like but couldn't, but really had a hard time justifying because you were really putting yourself on hard mode. What are some ones where you feel like they actually captured the essence and did it well?
So I think we each picked 3 for this, and there are I've got an Eldar and 2 Sisters of Battle ones. The Eldar one that I think works the best is Eldar Tanks Are Back. One of the Fire Prism is currently one of the boogeymen in the codex, and I get that. But it's also nice that the Exorcist is dangerous and feels like, if you line up against an Eldar anti-tank gun, you're going to have a bad day. The Falcon's got some interesting rules to it. They've all got sort of some nice rules that are in there. The other one that I really like to see get sort of buffed is there's 2 sisters ones. One is Astrid Thurga, who was a model nobody bought because all of her special rules were only for Crusade.
Weird.
Yeah, she essentially would show up in your army in 9th edition, would show up in your army, write down the cool shit your Saint Potentia did, and it was the fastest way to get your Saint Potentia up to being a living saint.
Okay. Got it.
So like whenever you had codex reviews from like competitive podcasts, they'd be like, I don't even know why this character exists. And in fairness, for them, it didn't. Now it does cool shit. Like Miracle Dice work better, and it gives, I don't remember what the rule is, but both her and her little scribe minion do cool stuff. Cool. The other one I really, really liked is Paragon Warsuits. I have wanted to like the Nundums. And in 9th edition, they were just an affectation. They were tough enough that it was worth shooting at anti-tank, and not tough enough that getting shot at with anti-tank wouldn't kill them instantly.
Right.
They have a 4-up invulnerable save now, which is what they needed.
Wow.
So with Morven Vol, they're the cat's pajamas. But even without Morven Vol, they're a solid unit that you're not like, okay, so why did you take this? And they're just, they're pretty damn good.
Cool. Well, my picks, 2 of them are Chaos picks, and they both highlight the same thing. So I'll save those 2. Corsairs, I will do first. So when I played that game, I was like, I cannot roll out a pure Coven list. You need shooting. I can't get away with it like I did in 9th. I can't get away with it like I did in 8th or 7th. Like I can't just do that and be like the guy who pulls that off. Like I need some shooting. And if I don't want to just go straight to Cobbleites, Corsairs actually have rules that look useful, that look good. I don't know that they're all that great as far as interactions and things like that, but they're not laughable. They look serviceable, and despite being a massive pain in the ass to assemble, I want to paint some. I mean, I actually want to play my Drakari and I want to add some of these to it just to add a little flavor and do that.
Yeah, they're on my to-do list as well.
Yeah, they're awesome models. Now, the thing, I'm going to put two models together because they both highlight the same thing. The Forge Fiend and the World Eater's Demon Prince on foot. And the reason why I'm putting both of those in there is that a thing they did this edition that, thank fucking God they did, is that when you think back to Ynnari and when they were doing their bullshit shoot twice thing, and Eldar players had to pay the Ynnari tax for their Dark Reapers because they were absolutely amazing over here doing that. When I was reading through different things, I read through the Chaos Space Marine things and I read the Forge Fiend, and I'm like, oh, this is actually, I have one and I've always wanted to paint it. It looks decent. Then when I went to read the World Eaters one, I was like, oh, they've got it too. And I wanted to make sure there weren't like differences in weapon profiles. And when I read its ability, World Eaters have a completely different ability for their Forge Fiend. Same unit, same stat profile, but the special rule for the unit is different. And for World Eaters, any unit that they shoot at has to take a battle shock test. And I was like, well, that's an interesting and good mechanic for an army that needs time to get across the field to charge and do things. You could shoot at things that are back on objectives or whatever it is. And then I was like, I started looking and comparing, okay, well, what does the Forge Fiend look like in a, Thousand Suns list? And then when I got to the Demon Prince one, the World Eater's Demon Prince on foot is a better force multiplier for your army than the one with wings, who's just good at flying and chopping up stuff. He gives like a 4-up invulnerable to units that are with infantry units within 6 inches of them. And it's like, I had my Demon Prince all ready to go, except I hadn't put the wings on because I'm going to paint those separately. And I really wanted to do one on foot. And I built this one for my Black Legion, but I hadn't attached the head and stuff like that. And now I'm like, I want to make a World Eaters one on foot. It looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
So this mechanic of being able to take the same stat line, but then give different special rules, then you can go and do things where, you can adjust that one special rule and how it interacts with, the Thousand Suns had some sort of an ability that does something else with battle shock things. If they all have the same, it causes battle shock tests. It can cause a problem that will screw up the points for one and not the others. And so that part, doing that really was a smart move. And
that is, I think, a really cool piece of tech that I hope they continue to emphasize is, this thing that appears in multiple codexes doesn't have to do the same thing.
Yeah. Although, interestingly enough, World Eaters have the only rhinos without a firing deck. I mean, everybody's running around with a fucking pistol, so it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think any World Eaters players are like, oh my God.
If you're in pistol range, you best be charging.
Yeah, you're not doing your job. So, all right, let's get a little salty for a second, because I still have the taste of Marmite thick in the back of my throat here. Units that didn't translate well, what did you pick?
So number one on that list, again, 2 sisters and an Eldar unit. Number one on that list is Celestians. These were the elite bodyguard Vulture sisters. Yeah. Ever since 3rd edition, Games Workshop has not quite figured out how to make that unit work. Right. And in 10th edition, they just sent them out to pasture. And so if you have Celestians, they're now just fancy sisters of battle, or they're the either the Paragons or the Sacrosants. So they're just gone. So they didn't translate because they're gone. The Dogmata, I don't know if it didn't translate well or not, but getting rid of the priests as a thing with their sort of not spells hit the Dogmata pretty hard. And so that character went from sort of, honestly, one of the centerpiece sort of models and characters of my sister's army to, well, I suppose I might take it in a big game. So I'm a little just disappointed by that one. And then the other one is sort of this thing I'm struggling, which is Eldar characters, and specifically, so there's some parts of it I miss, like you can't make a super aggressive Farseer, which I've talked about a little bit, and have it not be Eldrad. I was trying to figure out where the, like, what if all offensive powers Eldar Psyker is, and the answer is it's Eldrad. But the real big problem I have with it is what units they're allowed to lead are garbage. So like the Windrider is the one on a jet bike is allowed to lead Wind Riders. Not Wind Riders and Shining Spears, just Wind Riders. So for every game I played with them so far, their primary reason to exist is to get me more command points and skulk in the back on an objective. Which is sort of disappointing for a character with like a cool banner and a laser lance and all kinds of shit.
Sure.
It's very strange. And the foot Autarch can only lead Guardian units. And it's really weird to have this character who's walked all the aspects but cannot lead aspect warriors.
Right.
Similarly, the Warlocks can only, not the Warlocks, the Farseers can only go in Guardian units. And so like,
Yeah.
It's just frustrating because you could see some really cool sort of buffs with things and oh, you're gonna go along with so and so.
Yeah.
But instead it's just you're hanging out with the reservists.
Yeah. So my list, again, I have two things that I picked that are gonna have a theme, even though they're from completely different factions. And the first one is, I mean, I play all of these, so these are from my stable, so to speak. Plague Marines. I haven't played with my Death Guard at all, and oh my god, when they previewed their rules, and for the first month, I had to completely silence that group on social media stuff. And finally, the people that are posting now are kind of like, yeah, just you like the army though, right? Keep going, but. Plague Marines and Toughness, I don't get what they're doing because Toughness 5, again, this is getting into that whole legacy stat thing. Toughness 5 ain't what it used to be. So just we're Toughness 2 or Toughness 5 2-wound Marines. I mean, they do get the little thing where they get to add 1 to their morale tests, so it's like they get the whole like we're advancing, they're grinders, but it's not. The toughness part isn't there. I mean, if they'd made them 3 wounds, then you don't have to add something like feel no pain or something like that. But I remember a long time ago having this conversation with Jody locally, and he was like, Games Workshop, there's a lot of different ways to reflect toughness. And sometimes they do it well and sometimes they don't. Like the reanimation protocols for Necrons, like that for Jody is always the test for any edition, like if they've actually nailed it or not. So there's that one. I haven't played my Plague Marines. I will at some point this fall, but it just hasn't come up. But just reading through it, I'm like, that's pretty hard to get excited about for their cost. The one thing where I can look at stuff and easily say this clearly was rushed or there weren't enough eyes on this. I don't want to go and say it's lazy writing because the guys the people that write these rules work their asses off and they really do want to make the thing work. Like I'm not trying to kiss up to people. I don't play test anymore or do that stuff, but you can tell when there wasn't enough time because you see little things like this. The Talos is not what it was. Now that you're getting to just use a single melee weapon, they have 2 different ones that you can have. So you can give them, chain flails and a macro scalpel, or you can give them a twin link liquefier and the glove, the Talos Pimpan, I always call it. The problem is they're only getting to use 1, and only one of those, the injector gives them an additional attack. Otherwise, they can only use 1. You can take 2 of the macro scalpels and it doesn't give them any sort of a benefit at all. It isn't like a Dreadnought close combat weapon where, for like a Hellbrood, if it takes 2, it gets, twin linked or something like that. So the fact that it doesn't have that means that the time wasn't spent to make that thing work. Like if there was, you take a macro scalpel and the chain flails, it allows you to reroll wounds or something like that. It needs something. The model was made for a different edition, and the rules don't line up with it.
Yeah.
And the last example that I would give is I was looking at, because the new plastic Cerastus Knights are coming out, and for my Imperial ones, I have an Acheron, I have a Cerastus painted for my Imperial Knights. And I was like, oh, it'd be cool to do an Acheron for my Chaos ones, giant fucking flamer and a chain fist. I wonder what the profile is on it. And I looked and the flamer looks like a giant flamethrower. That's cool. But then when I looked at the chain fist, I was like, okay, it has a sweep and a regular profile. And I'm like, okay, that's all right. And I was like, I wonder what the Castigator does. I wonder if it's a little better than it used to be. The Castigator's sweep and strike attacks are exactly the same. So it isn't like the chain fist does. I think when I was messaging you this, you said it does chain fisty things, right? Like you
Yeah,
aren't getting like additional damage against vehicles. You aren't getting, and with the sword, you aren't getting like if they had like one less attack on the strike and you get rerolls to hit against infantry on a sweep one or something like that. It differentiates the two. And the fact that they both have the exact same profile and there's a plastic model on the horizon tells me that they just didn't have time to do these right.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you were telling me that. And I was disappointed by that because like, you want the chain fist to be like digging into other knights and doing horrible things. And like the sword should work differently. It should not just be big weapon does the thing. Which is where it is right now.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that said, I have no doubt that they'll end up ironing this stuff out, but it's just for a while, you know, you can do things with points, but I don't know they're going to want to go in and start updating a bunch of profiles and things like that. So I don't know. It was a huge undertaking. I think there are signs that there wasn't as much time to do it as they needed to do is how I would look. I mean, that's just my cold read looking at the thing. That's not based on anything. I'm pulling that out of my ass, but it's just one of those things where it looks like there are more time could have been spent. But that said, I think there is a very serviceable game. And more importantly, my friends locally are fired up and want to play 40K again. And I haven't been able to say that for a long time. So they definitely did. They did far more right than the little nitpicky things that we went over. So
I think that's fair. I think they've done a really good job getting the community energized for it and having everyone feel like they have the tools to play an army that, for better or worse, feels like their army.
Right. Well, I would ask if we have any closing thoughts, but we're about to run out of time. I have to get to work and close some things out. Next month, we legitimately do want to do this World Eaters one. In fact, I was going through my iPad and I was really concerned because there was a book that I wanted to reread that I don't have, and I really don't want to spend $16 on it, but I feel like I need to for the episode. So I'm going to do it for the kids. And I'm hoping that we see we saw the World Eater special rules in Epic, but I mean, I'm hoping that we get a little something more so we can try to roll them in.
That would be good.
Yeah. Again, Eric, plug your podcast and we'll close out here.
All right. So places you can find me. I'm on Twitter at Variance Hammer, as long as Twitter still exists. And I'm now also on Blue Sky at Variance Hammer. Terribly creative names. And I have started a new podcast. It's called The Plastic Press Gang. And you can find that on all the usual sites for that. If you, for some reason, can't find it and listen to this show, it's probably in the show notes. And if not, come visit us on our Discord and we will send you a link to it there. Yeah.
And you can reach us at our Gmail account too, losttothenails@gmail.com. And we will go ahead and if you want to get added to our Discord group, we can do that. It's a good group of people. I've had to do zero policing. I kept threatening that if I had to do any policing, I was nuking it from orbit. And I haven't had to do shit, which is exactly the commitment level that I'm here for. So, there's nowhere to find me. I mean, I guess I have an Instagram account, but I sure as shit don't post anything to it. So this is it, which is enough. So, well, we just got our 5-minute warning, so we'll go ahead and close out here. See you next time.